you been holding out on me, huh? I thought you only went to see those slasher films. Hey, how about if I bring back the cab? I can keep you company, we can just chat it up, have some coffee. I just don't think it's worth it to keep driving around here like this.
I don't know. I guess we were just too young when we got married. I mean, my husband wasn't young, I was.
You still are.
I'm heading up to Trancas. It's past Malibu's a ways. As fast as possible. Wow! What a trip. You're a female cab driver.
I know, it's like it's people at night.
There will be this woman standing out on the corner. She said something about going to Trancas. She sounded upset.
Wonderful. Now, for a woman in distress, I'll go to Trancas.
I used to drive a cab. I drove a cab for about 6 months. And during that time, well, there were a lot of things that happened during that time, but one in particular was this little moment that I decided to write about, where a woman came into, it happened, I filmed it just the way it happened. And it left a pretty intense impression on me. I felt a lot of angst over it, a lot of sense of betrayal over that experience. And it wasn't this woman's fault, but what I felt I needed to get out of that experience, not consciously, but unconsciously. But it was one of those little stories that sort of haunted me for a long time, and over time I was able to work it through on paper and then finally on film.
Yeah, I have to pick up my kids, I have to pack my bags. I'm leaving him. Leave me alone. Pick up my kids, I have to pack my bags. I'm leaving him.
Carla recently made her first film, but before getting into film, she has used photography as an investigative tool to probe into relationships. I went to visit her in her studio. Carla, what have you been working on lately?
Generic headshots, which is what I will do upon occasion for cash.
But what about your other work?
My mother and daughter work is a body of work that I started a long time ago, about 9 years ago. And it's a study on mothers and daughters and the tension in the relationship between the two people. And I've done probably close to 75 sets of mothers and daughters in various different locales, under various different settings. Aaron and Lynette lived in a trailer park, and actually Lynette, who was the mother, had a little house that she had built herself. She was a carpenter, drove a Harley Davidson. And when I walked into her house, it was totally spick and span. There was not a speck of dust anywhere. Everything was in its place. And she had built a room for her grandchildren that was all in miniature. And it forced me to deal with the fact that I had to give up my impression of who I thought she was, which was sort of a rough, tough biker chick.
What motivated you to do the Daughters and Mothers shoot?
Well, it was my relationship with my mother and wanting to explore the good and the bad about it, and if other mothers and daughters related to each other the way that my mother and I related. And sometimes they did, and sometimes they didn't. In this particular case, Sandy and Babs had not necessarily a similar relationship, but there was a lot of tension and a lot of competition between the two of them. And there were some more glamorous shots of them, but this is the one that I chose. And this is one of the few photographs, or a few sets, where I only chose one photograph to to see the relationship. Usually I chose 3 or 4 photographs. And it was interesting because Sandy, when she looked at it, said, yes, this is it.
Is it that when you're taking these pictures that you also can relate to your mother better, or that you have learned something by shooting these pictures?
Well, I don't think that taking the photographs made me relate to my mother any better, but it certainly allowed me to explore what that was about, explore the tension. And I was able to see that a little bit more. I could expand on that. This is Peaches and her mother. She had 5 daughters or 4 daughters, and each one that I photographed related physically to their mother very differently. And Peaches was actually very physical with her mother. And I got them on the bed and then sort of got on top of them and started photographing, and they were very easygoing with me. Although when she was with another daughter, her eldest daughter, I asked the eldest daughter, what if you could do something for your mother, what would you do to make her life a little bit easier? And there was sort of a long pause, and then she'd say, well, I'd buy my mother a new car. And I don't know why at that point in time the mother started crying. But what was sort of interesting was that afterwards, quite a bit afterwards, like a couple of weeks afterwards, I was told by Peaches that they had just had a fight before I arrived.
How has this show influenced you in making your film?
It influenced me in various different ways, and I suppose the most was that it helped me deal with people in a very intimate kind of way, and it kind of motivated me to want to deal with them in a very kind of intimate way, and being able to draw on experiences to have something come out on film. In this situation, it was to have something come out on paper, on the photograph. There were a lot of things that just how to wait for the right moment.
You gotta do something. I mean, you're leaving them. You're packing up your bags, you're getting your kids, and you're leaving them. That takes a lot of guts. Listen, when we get up to Trancas, I'll wait for you, all right? I'll wait for you, and then I'll bring you back down to Santa Monica free of charge.
I've just had it. I mean, Tony's just gotten too weird.
Sometimes the actors were not ready. They needed to prepare, and it's watching, observing someone preparing themselves to expose themselves, to become vulnerable. I had a lot of patience in taking mothers and daughters, and if someone said come back in 3 months or 4 months, or come back because the planets were in astrological formation, I would come back until they were ready. If it was waiting until they tried on 15 different outfits, then I would do that. They were often very demanding, I don't think consciously ever, but that was fine, and I would just wait until they were ready. That's why I always said to them when I called them up, it'll take about 4 or 5 hours, and we might need to take breaks, blah blah blah. The phone might ring. And in the same token, working with actors is kind of the same way. They need to prepare, they need to study, they need to explore, they need to talk about other things that relate to their character, and it was all preparation. Also, what I found was that once I had finished the project and I saw everything up in the gallery, and most of the sets were in groups of 4 or 5, they looked like a continuous piece of film. So I realized there was a process that was going on here that was not just taking the photograph and acknowledging the experience, but also that it led somewhere.
Do you feel that representing the story on film helped you to get in touch more with that experience?
Yeah. I think I think that working things out creatively is one way of working out your sense of neuroses. I mean, I didn't plan it that way, but that was, I think, that's the final outcome that that seems to be becoming apparent to me at this point in time is that I'm working out certain, neuroses. I shouldn't be saying something like that, but.
Thank you for everything. Thank you. But I thought I was taking you back down to Santa Monica. I thought we fight all the time. Besides which, I know that he loves me.
Thank you.